This is a replicated nursery, my toys, the dolls, the crib, the wallpaper was redone, replicated, and put together to do this exhibit. And the rocking chairs are all as is in my nursery upstairs.
Millions of visitors have toured Graceland believing they were seeing Elvis's real home. However, they were walking through a carefully constructed lie.
The tours start in the morning and they end at 4, so if we were to stay in the house, Elvis's room and my mother's room are not part of the tour, so we would stay upstairs and have to wait basically. We'd get stuck until the tours were over.
Elvis's own family became prisoners in their mansion, trapped upstairs until tourists left. The Presley family fought to their last breath to protect these secrets.
We have to sell Graceland. And I just looked at him and I said, that will never happen.
Even facing bankruptcy, Priscilla refuses to sell. But one woman had unlimited access to those forbidden floors. Nancy Rooks, Elvis's maid for over a decade.
Sometimes you ride the horses around the place. Sometimes you ride the motorcycles around the place. Do different little odds, and then sometimes they play tennis.
The king of rock and roll was sleeping his life away while Nancy did all the work. She witnessed Elvis at his most vulnerable, not performing, just existing. And what she discovered in those sealed rooms explains why they've remained locked for nearly 50 years. When Elvis Presley bought Graceland in 1957 for $102,500, he wasn't just purchasing a mansion, he was creating a sanctuary. But running this sprawling estate required a dedicated staff who would become some of the most trusted people in his life. Among them, Nancy Rooks stood apart. Nancy Rooks was hired in 1967 to work as a maid and cook inside Graceland, but from the moment she stepped through the door, she realized she hadn't entered a mansion, she'd entered a storm. Graceland wasn't your typical celebrity home. The mansion pulsed with an unpredictable rhythm that revolved entirely around Elvis's moods and schedule. Some days, the halls would echo with laughter, piano music, and late-night conversations. Other times, a heavy silence would fall over the house, so thick it felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Nancy quickly learned that working at Graceland meant adapting to Elvis's world completely. The house didn't operate on any normal schedule. It operated on Elvis time. He might be up all night playing music, then sleep until late afternoon. Meals could happen at any hour, and guests might arrive without warning. But what struck Nancy most was Elvis himself. Away from the spotlight, he was polite, soft-spoken, and surprisingly humble. He would greet her warmly each morning, often asking simple questions like whether there was any bacon left. Yet she also witnessed his contradictions, moments of boyish charm followed by periods of withdrawal and moodiness. At 2 in the morning, she might find him pacing the hallways in silence, lost in deep thought. Other times, he would spontaneously break into a gospel song that would fill the entire house with soul-stirring music. To the outside world, he was the king of rock and roll. To Nancy, he was simply Mr. Elvis, a man full of contradictions, brilliance, and quiet fragility. This was just the beginning of Nancy's journey into Elvis's private world, a world that would pull her deeper than she ever imagined possible. Nancy Rooks's job description might have said maid and cook, but her actual responsibilities went far beyond anything written on paper. She became Elvis's confidant, caretaker, and one of the few people allowed into his most private spaces during his most vulnerable moments. When Elvis couldn't sleep, which happened frequently, Nancy would be there. When he had sudden cravings for his favorite foods at impossible hours, she would prepare them without question.
When he was in the hospital, he would call me to bring him in different foods. And one day he called me and told me, he says, Mary, said they have me on a diet, and I want you to slip me some hot dogs with kraut on them. And wrap them up and slip them into me and tell them there's some clothes that you were bringing me up here.
Her attention to detail was remarkable. She laid out his scarves and rings with precision, always remembering which watch matched which jumpsuit. She arranged the pool area exactly as he liked it, kept his favorite snacks within arm's reach, and knew exactly how he preferred his sweet potato pie, hot, soft, and made from scratch, even if it was the middle of the night.
He would just hang around the house. He would go to the swimming pool. I'd go set the pool up for him. so he could lay out by the pool.
What set Nancy apart from other staff members was the level of trust Elvis placed in her. He was obsessed with cleanliness, showering multiple times a day, sometimes within the same hour. Yet he allowed Nancy into his most private spaces, his bathroom, his bedroom, the chaos of his personal world. This level of access was unprecedented for household staff. In a world where everything around Elvis was constantly shifting, the fame, the pressure, the endless demands, Nancy became something rare, a steady, reliable presence. She didn't pry into his business, didn't judge his choices, and didn't try to change him. She simply watched, listened, and remained loyal. Somewhere along the way, Nancy stopped being just an employee. She became something much more significant, the person who would eventually carry Elvis's most sacred and important secret. But that revelation would come later, on a morning that would change everything forever. August 16th, 1977 began like so many other mornings at Graceland. Strange, sleepless, and unpredictable. Elvis had been up all night playing racquetball with his girlfriend Ginger Alden and his cousin Billy. As dawn approached, he returned to the house, and Nancy was already in the kitchen, preparing for what she assumed would be another long day. When Elvis walked into the kitchen that morning, Nancy immediately noticed something was different. He looked pale and exhausted, more so than usual after his all-night activities. His request was simple but telling. No food, just some water. This wasn't entirely unusual. Elvis often had periods where he would barely eat, but something about his demeanor struck Nancy as off. Later that morning, Nancy heard something that made her pause. A thud. It wasn't loud or violent, just wrong somehow. She listened for a moment, heard only silence, and convinced herself it was nothing. She went back to her work, not knowing that this sound would haunt her for the rest of her life. The hours that followed would transform Graceland from a home into a crime scene, and Nancy from a trusted employee into a key witness to one of the most significant moments in music history. What she would discover upstairs would challenge everything she thought she knew about that morning. At exactly 1:50 p.m., the tranquil atmosphere of Graceland was shattered. The intercom crackled to life with an urgency that immediately told Nancy Rooks something was terribly wrong. After decades of working in the house, she had developed an instinct for reading the mood of Graceland, and this felt different from anything she had experienced before. Without hesitation, Nancy dropped what she was doing and rushed toward the staircase. The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly before her, each step echoing louder than the last. The air felt heavy, and the silence was suffocating. As she approached the bathroom, she was unprepared for what she would find. There on the bathroom floor lay Elvis Presley, face down and completely motionless. There was no movement, no breath, no sign of life. The sight hit Nancy like a physical blow to the chest, but her years of training and instinct took over. She didn't scream or collapse. She immediately turned to find help.
I push the telephone down and I go upstairs, but not through the black doors. I walk down the hallway to look through his dressing room area into his bathroom. And when I saw him, with his face buried kind of down in the carpet and half dressed.
When the paramedics arrived, it was already too late. But Nancy's role wasn't finished. With the quiet efficiency of someone who knew Graceland better than anyone else, she took charge of guiding the emergency responders through the winding halls, up the narrow staircase, and through the tight corners of a home that was now cloaked in something colder than grief. Throughout this chaos, Nancy maintained her composure. Her hands moved with calm precision, her voice remained steady, but inside, her mind was reeling. A single question began forming that would follow her for the rest of her life. What had she just witnessed? The official cause of death would be declared as cardiac arrhythmia, but for Nancy, who had been there that morning, who had seen Elvis's desperate thirst for water, who had heard that wrong-sounding thud, the official explanation would never fully satisfy her growing doubts. The bathroom where Elvis died would later become one of the most protected spaces in Graceland, sealed off from public view and maintained exactly as it was on that August day. When Graceland opened to the public in 1982, the decision to keep the entire second floor off limits wasn't made lightly.
The tours start in the morning and they end at 4, so if we were to stay in the house, Elvis's room and my mother's room are not part of the tour. So we would stay upstairs and have to wait, basically. We'd get stuck until the tours were over.
While the official explanation centered on respect for the family's privacy, those who knew the truth understood there were deeper reasons for maintaining that boundary. Elvis's bathroom itself became a shrine of sorts, but not the kind that could ever be shared with the public. Every detail remained frozen in time. The medications on the counter, the towels folded exactly as Nancy had left them, even the reading material Elvis had with him in his final moments. It was a space that held too many questions, too many inconsistencies, and too much raw grief to ever become part of a public tour. Riley Keough, Elvis's granddaughter, would later confirm that the bathroom remained untouched, calling it a space of deep respect where grief and memory collide. She refused to describe it in detail, understanding that some spaces are too sacred, too painful, and too complicated to share with the world. The upstairs level of Graceland wasn't just closed to protect the family's privacy, it was closed to protect the truth itself. In that bathroom lay evidence of Elvis's final struggle, traces of the medications that may have contributed to his death, and the lingering questions about what really happened that August morning. Nancy's small act of tidying up had inadvertently created a crime scene that could never be fully reconstructed. For the Presley family, keeping that floor sealed wasn't just about maintaining dignity. It was about controlling a narrative that had already been altered in those crucial first moments. The bathroom where the king of rock and roll drew his last breath would remain forever frozen, a testament to the thin line between public legend and private tragedy, accessible only to those who had earned the right to carry its secrets. After Elvis's death, Graceland transformed dramatically. What had once been a private family home became a public monument, but not everything would be accessible to the millions of fans who would eventually walk its halls. The upstairs level, including Elvis's bedroom and the bathroom where he died, was sealed off permanently.
This is a replicated nursery, my toys, the dolls, the crib, the wallpaper was redone, replicated, and put together to do this exhibit. And the rocking chairs are all as is in my nursery upstairs.
The decision to seal the second floor wasn't made lightly. While the official explanation centered on respecting the family's privacy and maintaining the dignity of Elvis's memory, those who understood the full scope of what had happened that August morning knew there were deeper, more troubling reasons for maintaining that impenetrable boundary. The transformation of Graceland into a tourist destination was remarkable in its scope. Fans came from around the world, lining up in the Memphis heat just to glimpse the life Elvis had left behind. Tour guides walked guests past velvet ropes and carefully curated displays. Gift shops opened, souvenirs and posters lined the walls, and Elvis's voice played through speakers throughout the mansion. His image was everywhere, but it was a sanitized, controlled version of his legacy. While tourists could see Elvis's jumpsuits, gold records, and the famous jungle room, the most intimate spaces of his life remained frozen in time. His bedroom, his bathroom, the very place where everything ended, was declared sacred, untouched by flash photography and souvenir maps. These weren't just private spaces, they were crime scenes that could never be fully investigated, evidence that had been inadvertently altered, and memories too painful to share with the world. The upstairs level contained more than just Elvis's personal effects. It held the unvarnished truth about his final days, the medications scattered on nightstands, the reading material he had with him in his final moments, the exact positioning of furniture and personal items that might have told a different story about how he died. Most importantly, it contained the bathroom where Nancy had been asked to tidy up before the paramedics arrived. Nancy was among the select few allowed access to these sealed areas. Each time she climbed those stairs to dust a shelf or fold a shirt, the memories would return with vivid intensity. She didn't just clean those rooms, she relived that terrible day over and over again. The silence, the thud she had heard that morning, the image of Elvis lying face down on the cold bathroom floor, all of it would come flooding back each time she entered those sacred spaces. The weight of what she had witnessed, combined with the knowledge of what she had been asked to do in those crucial first moments, created a burden that grew heavier with each passing year. She moved through those rooms not as a housekeeper, but as someone who had been there when the world shifted, someone still carrying the truth pressed quietly into the folds of her memory. Every piece of furniture, every medication bottle, every personal item she touched was a reminder of the morning that changed everything, and of her role in altering the scene before investigators could properly document it. The bathroom itself had become a mausoleum of sorts, but not the kind that could ever be shared with the public. Every detail remained exactly as Nancy had left it after her instinctive tidying. The towels folded, the counter wiped clean, the scattered items repositioned. It was a space that held too many questions, too many inconsistencies, and too much raw grief to ever become part of a public tour. For years, Nancy maintained her silence about what she had witnessed and what she had been asked to do. But truth has a way of demanding to be heard, and over time, the weight of her secret began to push its way to the surface. Some stories, no matter how carefully buried, refuse to stay hidden forever. In the final years of her life, something shifted within Nancy Rooks. The woman who had faithfully kept Elvis's secrets for decades began to speak more openly about what she had witnessed at Graceland. Nancy Rooks worked the evening shift at Graceland from 5 p.m. to 1 a.m., 7 days a week for 10 years. But her official schedule was just the beginning of an impossible workload that would define her life and eventually contribute to her own tragic end. Nancy's 56-hour work week would have been challenging enough, but Elvis's unpredictable lifestyle meant she never knew when her shift would actually end. His parties, recording sessions, or personal crises could extend her workday by hours without warning. Often, she was working 70-plus hours weekly, a level of overwork that violated even 1970s labor standards. What made Nancy's situation even more exploitative was how Elvis disguised his demands as friendship. Even his downtime required her labor, though he presented it as leisure time they shared together. Nancy had to set up pool chairs, arrange towels, bring drinks, and ensure everything was perfect for Elvis's relaxation. While he enjoyed leisure time, she was working to facilitate his entertainment. This emotional manipulation made her feel valued while masking the reality of her exploitation. Fellow staff member Mary Jenkins faced even more extreme conditions. While officially scheduled for 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. shifts, Elvis's nocturnal lifestyle meant she was essentially on call 24 hours a day. If Elvis wanted a peanut butter and banana sandwich at 3 a.m., Mary was expected to get up and prepare it immediately, regardless of her own need for sleep.
If he wanted them in the morning when he woke up, I would have to fix them. If he wanted them at 2 o'clock in the morning, I would have to still fix them for him. Whenever he get a taste for him, he'd call down, and that's what he wanted.
Elvis justified his constant demands through emotional manipulation, claiming that eating was his only enjoyment in life. This guilt trip made Mary feel responsible for his happiness, while ignoring the toll his demands were taking on her own health and well-being. The chronic sleep deprivation alone was dangerous. Medical research shows that constant sleep interruption significantly increases the risk of cardiovascular disease, stroke, and heart attack, exactly the conditions that would ultimately kill Mary at age 78. Nancy witnessed Elvis's decline firsthand, watching him take medications that weren't always prescribed to him. Pills would come and go, sometimes brought by others, sometimes swapped, sometimes forgotten in the chaos. She remembered how he started falling asleep mid-sentence, during meals, in conversations that had barely begun. The tragic endings of both women reveal the true cost of their devotion. On August 15, 2022, Nancy Rooks died at age 84 in a Memphis nursing home, dependent on government assistance rather than surrounded by the wealth and security that decades of faithful service should have provided. Mary Jenkins had faced an even more heartbreaking end 22 years earlier. On May 30, 2000, she suffered a massive heart attack and died with only her nephew at her side. The medical bills from her final illness consumed what little savings she had accumulated. Even in death, these women's loyalty was exploited. Nancy's final revelation about cleaning up the scene of Elvis's death showed how their devotion was used to protect his image at the expense of truth. Mary, too, maintained public silence about Elvis's drug problems, despite witnessing his obvious substance abuse daily. Both women died believing they had somehow failed Elvis, never recognizing that it was they who had been failed by a system that demanded everything while giving nothing in return. Nancy Rooks never asked for the spotlight. She loved Elvis not as the king of rock and roll, but as the man who once asked her to hem his pants while he cracked jokes. She kept his secrets, protected his dignity, and in the end, told the truth, not to damage his legacy, but to honor it. Anyway, that's it for this video, folks. Bye.